Welcome back to Snowy Owl Knits. A couple of weeks ago, my daughter-in-law, who I just adore, we were visiting, and she decided she needed a warmer hat for my grandson, who's almost 5 months old now. And so she showed me one that was made out of cotton, and it was too small for him now, and asked me if I would knit one. Of course, yes, I can do that. I can do that. Of course I can. Of course. Here's the story, here's the download, here's the scoop on this. Her mother, well, my daughter-in-law is from the Czech Republic. She's just a wonderful, wonderful person. Her mother, Teresa, is, of course, from the Czech Republic as well. And when I met her a couple of months ago after the grandson was born, she had a pair of chopsticks that she had whittled down. And she was knitting away these gorgeous seamless socks, 2 chopsticks making socks. So there was a little bit of, wow, if she can do that, I can do that kind of thing. You know, there's a little grandma competition going on. She's lovely. I'm sure if she watches this, she'll laugh and remember it. But when I decided, yes, I want to do the hats, I mean, hats are my favorite thing to do, really. I got home and I realized, well, how am I going to do that? Like, how do I make the ear flap look seamless with the hat? And so I tried a couple of different things, and I came up with a way of doing it that I want to share with you. So here, oh, and the other part of the story is that my daughter-in-law, once she realized that her son was getting one, she called me up and said, "Do you think you could make us matching ones?" Holy cow, yes, pressure was on. So here's the baby version right here. And these are not Dallas cowboy colors. They're actually heather gray and heather blue. So lest any of you confuse me with being, making them cowboy memorabilia, you're wrong. So I just want you to notice, and you'll get a close up later. These ear flaps are all knit seamlessly with the body of the hat, and the mother's is the same way. These are done in garter stitch, which is, when you're knitting in the round, it's knit 1 row, purl 1 row, knit 1 row, purl 1 row. But the reason I decided to go with garter stitch was because these ear flaps, if you did this in stockinette stitch, they would curl, and I don't think there's any amount of blocking in the world that takes care of some of that stockinette curl. So now that they've got their hats, I want one of my own, but I want it out of this Eco Duo zebra. It's just luscious, and so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you the process from start to finish without all the boring stuff in between, and you too can have your own hat. I think the thing that I really want you to take away from this is that it's not just a pattern. This is a method that you can use, and you can use any stitch that you want with it. It's the construction of it that I wanted to give to you. So for your work, you're going to need, if you want to use this Eco Duo, this is called, the colorway is Zebra, and we'll be using circular needles with an 18-inch diameter. You'll need a set of double-pointed needles. You'll need a crochet hook, a tapestry needle. Oh, let's see if I can pick it up. Tapestry needle, a little stitch marker, one will do, and a pair of scissors. So let's get started. So the construction of the hat is actually fairly simple. We're going to begin by creating 2 ear flaps that will be, of course, on the ear side of the head. Once we have those knit up and we have them on a set of double-pointed needles, we will then cast on our circular needles. We'll do 7 stitches to begin with, just cast them on. Then we will knit each ear flap, we'll knit the first ear flap on, I should say, and then we will use the knitted cast on to do the front section. We'll do 20 stitches there, and then we'll go ahead and just knit the second ear flap on, and we will do the knitted cast on in 6 stitches. And the reason we have 7 stitches in one area and 6 in the other is because we're going to use 1 extra stitch to do the invisible join. So let's get started with making the ear flaps. Like I said, for the hat you'll need a set of double pointed needles, but to do the 2 ear flaps you'll begin by using 3, well 2 at a time, but 3. I'm using a size 6 double pointed needle. These are made by Addi, and they're the Addi flips. They're 8 inches long, and I love them because they have a very pointed tip at one end and a blunter tip at the other, and I prefer using this pointed tip for a lot of some of the stitches, like the knitting front and back. So let's get started here with the ear flaps. We don't need much tail, and we're just going to cast on 2 stitches like so. And on the first row, just to kind of solidify this cast on row, I'm going to hold that tail down just a little bit and just knit. Whoops, it slipped around anyway. I'm going to knit these 2 stitches. I always find that first row to be a little bit wonky, so that's why I do the 2 stitches. Now on the ear flaps, we are going to create a small eyelet which we can then thread the little strings through that go with the ear flap hat. So to do that, I'm going to, on this next row, I'm going to knit 1. I'm going to do a yarn over and knit the last one. And then on this next row, let me get everything tightened up just a little bit. I'm going to knit the first one and just let that yarn over fall off the needle and knit the last stitch. Okay, now if you want to give it a little tug, you can. The hole itself, the little decorative hole, won't be as noticeable until we get a little bit further up, but this is where we start the increases. In order to do the increase on this first one, we're going to knit the front and back of both stitches. So we begin knitting and don't pull the stitch off the needle. Then we pivot around and we go into the back leg of that stitch from the top and wrap the yarn and knit that. And now we have 2 stitches where we only had 1 before. So again, we're going to knit front and back. So I begin knitting, but I do not pull the stitch off of the needle. I just take my right needle and go in through the back leg from the top of that stitch and knit that. And now I've got 4 stitches. On the next row, I'm just going to knit all stitches. So basically what we're doing is an increase row followed by a plain knit row, and an increase row followed by a plain knit row. So we've just done our plain knit row, and now we're going to increase just the first and the last stitch of the row. We'll knit the front and back. Oops, I think I split that yarn. The front and the back, and knit the next 2 stitches And on the last stitch, we knit the front and the back. And then we'll follow that by a plain knit row. On this return row, everything seems to kind of tighten up and feel much better. And, whoops, trying to split yarn all over the place. This Eco Duo yarn is so nice to the touch, and it's called Zebra, as you can see. It has a center that's a little bit darker, so I'm pulling from the outside right now. So we've just finished a plain knit row, and it's time to continue increasing. We'll increase on the first stitch and the last stitch and just knit everything in between. And we'll repeat this until we have 20 stitches on the needle. And at that point we can begin to cast on. So knit front and back and just keep going until you have your 20 stitches. Okay, so I have my ear flaps done, and I have them sitting here and waiting on my double pointed needles, and I'm just going to kind of set these to the side, and I'm going to get my double pointed needles out. The circumference of this set, because I'm using the shorter needles, is 18 inches. And I chose that because this yarn is very stretchy, and I found that when I try to make something that seems the right size, like if I think of a 21-inch head, I want 20 inches, it's always too big. And so I just end up going a little bit smaller because I like for a tighter fit. Not a, cut off the circulation fit, but one that's tight enough. So I am going to get a length of yarn, and we're going to start by casting on 7 stitches. So I'm just going to wrap that yarn 4, 5, 6, 7, just to make sure I have enough along with my tail. And then I give myself a little extra because I get a little nervous about it. So I'm just going to use the long tail cast on. 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Once I have those in place, I'm going to get my tail kind of out of the way. I'm going to pick up one of my ear flaps, and I'm going to knit these off of the needle. So let me get my working yarn, make sure I have enough out there. And you'll find when you do this that this first stitch, because it just has a tail hanging off, it's going to feel a little bit loose. But that you can tighten that up later. So I have my 7 stitches cast on, and now I'm just going to knit these stitches off of the ear flap. And it's very nice that this is done in garter stitch, because you don't have to worry about a right side and a wrong side when you're doing this. You can just pick up those ear flaps and start knitting. Just knit them right on there. And let's see. I'm gonna give everything just a little tug down there to make myself feel better. This is really a very simple hat. I think the only thing that makes it a little less easy is that when you start working in the round and you want garter stitch, you have to knit one round and purl one round. So I guess if you're not a fan of purling, that might put you off a little bit, but I don't find it too terribly troubling. Okay, we almost have this first ear flap on. And now what I'm going to do is put aside this double-pointed needle, and to do the knitted cast on, we've actually turned our work around here because we have to cast stitches on with just one strand now. We can't do the usual long tail cast on. So this knitted cast on works by beginning to knit that stitch, and then you pull a length of it out and you twist it and place it on the left needle. And you can just leave your needle where it is because you're going to continue pulling up yarn as if you were knitting, turning it and twisting it so that you can go in through the bottom and just continue until you have 20 stitches cast on. Let's see, here we have 19 and 20. So that's the front part of the hat. And now we need to turn our needles again. We have the back half of the hat. We have one ear flap. We have the front of the hat. And now it's time to knit on our second ear flap. And it's just like it was before. We just simply knit them on. You can check to make sure you haven't left a gap with your join, but just kind of snugging it up a little bit helps ensure that. And when the hat is finished, you have the opportunity with some of the tails that are here to, you know, kind of remedy any slight imperfections if there are any. So let's get this ear flap on here. And then all we have to do is cast on the last 6 stitches for the back of the hat. You know, it's so cold where I am right now, and it feels very good to be knitting with nice soft yarn. I can't seem to get my studio warm enough ever, but I'd still do this in the summer if I wanted. And here I'm just kind of snugging up that last stitch, which is where I had cast on. So there we go. We just have 7 more stitches, or 6 more stitches to do here at the very end of the hat. And again, we're doing the knitted cast on. That's 3. Let me scoot these down. 4. 5. And last one. That is 6. So now as you can see, if I lay this out, kind of looks like a upside down bathing suit at this point, but we have half of the hat here, half of the back, an ear flap, the front of the hat, and the other half of the back. So I'm just going to bring my needles up, kind of scooch my stitches up and around. It's going to feel slightly tight at this point, but not terribly so. And if you don't remember the invisible join, basically what we do is we take that 7th stitch that we began with and we slip it over to the right needle, or yes, and then we slip 1 stitch from the right needle over that slipped stitch and let it fall off, and then we just take that stitch back and we're ready to just begin knitting. On the first round, you can just knit. And on the next round, you'll be purling. And that way you continue with the garter stitch. So I just wanted to show you, after several rows of the garter stitch from adding on the ear flaps, the piece, there's no seam at all for these ear flaps. I went ahead and woven my ends. You can see it's really just, this is the front of the hat, and everything looks just as it should. And so I'll continue to knit 1 row and purl 1 row until I've reached, about 2 inches from where I need to start decreasing, and then just shape the crown that way, and I'll come back and put a pom-pom on it and put my strings on here. I don't know if these little holes are going to show up or not. These little decorative holes that we made. Basically, it's just big enough that you're not stretching out the stitches when you are putting your tassel through. Just that little bit of extra room makes a difference. So that's where we are so far, and we'll just keep going until we get to the end. Okay, so I've finished up with the hat itself and attached a little pom-pom to the top, and now it's time to make the tassels. So I've cut 6 lengths of yarn about 36 inches long. I'm going to use 3 on one side and 3 on the other, and so I'm going to use my crochet hook and find that small hole that I made at the beginning. It's kind of hidden in here. Let's see if I can get that. There we go. And I will grab the center of one of these lengths of yarn and pull it from the front up through the back so that the loop comes up in the front. Just like this. And then pull out just enough yarn like this that you can get your fingers through, and pull that length through, and then cinch it up a little bit. And this will be done for both sides. We're making enough of a yarn tie that you can actually tie it. So when you doubled it up, you ended up with 6 strands, and so you just want to separate them into 2s, just like this, and just begin braiding. and make it just snug enough that it's holding together, but not so tight that it pulls and stretches. And takes a minute or two to get to the end, but we'll get there. When you get down here towards the bottom and you have the length that you prefer for the tassel-y part of this, what you need to do at this point is separate out one strand from each side and bring these others to the middle, and you will then begin to tie in the front, not too tightly at first, and then flip it over and tie it in the back as well. And what this does is it keeps it all together in a very neat way where it can't come apart, a tie can't come off. And go ahead and just sort of pull on everything to make sure you've got the right tension. So in the front you have a neat meeting, and in the back is where you want to tie the actual knot. Get my strand back, and I'll probably double knot this. Just to keep it really secure, because I'm going to snip these ends rather closely. And then I'll just even out the very end and snip them off like this. So you have a good long tie here on the hat, and you'll repeat this for the other side. Now I did want to mention that you could also do an I-cord tie if you wanted, but because this hat has such color runs, and in fact some parts of the ball were actually very dark, I wanted to make sure that both of my tassels ended up the same, and so this is why I made sure to cut lengths of yarn that were very, very similar. And so that's all there is to the hat once you've gotten yourself cleaned up, and it looks just gorgeous. I mean, it's without seams. You can't see where the ears are joined. And it's soft and beautiful. And this will keep me warm this winter when I'm out. Thanks again for joining me. It's been a pleasure having you, and I hope to see you again soon.